My name is Wendy Mayhew, and I am the author of WISER, the Definitive Guide to Starting a Business After the Age of 50. I said I wasn't going to bring in COVID too much in this, but I did not have the opportunity to do a book launch. And so I decided that I was going to do a virtual book launch. And that way I was able to do something a little bit different than just being there by myself. And I invited contributors to the book. I had 29 people who contributed to the book, and I have asked 3 of them to join me today, just so that we can talk about the transitioning from employee to entrepreneur, how you need to step out of your comfort zone, and of course, what is also so very important to everyone is financing. How am I going to finance my business? And of course, I wanted a moderator. And I don't know whether any of you are familiar with Paul Tasner. Paul started he was laid off his job at age 64, and he started his own business at 66. So I don't think there's anyone better to have as a moderator than someone that has actually gone through losing their job and having to do something different. The one other thing that I want to do before I pass this over to Paul, who will be introducing the panelists, and we'll get going on some questions, is that Paul did a TED Talk, and it has been viewed over 2 million times and has been translated into, into 29 different languages. Is that correct, Paul? Yes. Yeah, so if you haven't watched his TED Talk, do, because it's so good. He's comical, he's funny, and he says what he means about being, starting his business. So anyways, over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Wendy. Just made the common error of having myself on mute for the entire time. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's exciting to participate in an event like this. This is really close to my heart, and would have been a lot closer to my heart 9 years ago as well, but there was no WISER book or Wendy Mayhew in my life 9 years ago. But thank you for the very generous introduction, and I'd like to introduce each of the panelists and leave most of the speaking to them during this session, because they're all incredibly experienced and have achieved a high level of excellence in their respective fields. And I think it's a real privilege to be able to grab them for 90 minutes like this. They are Andy Molinsky, Mike Lee, and I want to get Trevor's hyphenated last name, Trevor Munn Ben. That's one you can't say 5 times quickly. Let me begin with Andy, please. Andy Molinsky is a tenured professor of organizational behavior and international management at Brandeis University. Andy received his PhD in organizational behavior and an MA in psychology from Harvard University. His work helps people develop the insights and courage necessary to act outside their personal and cultural comfort zones. Andy writes regularly for the Harvard Business Review and was recently chosen as a top voice on LinkedIn for his work on education. He's the author of 2 popular business books, Global Dexterity and Reach, and based on this work was recently named by Marshall Goldsmith as one of his top 50 global coaches. Mike Lee is president and co-founder. I hope I don't botch this. Is it Fundica?
It all works.
Close enough?
Yeah.
Mike is president and co-founder of Fundica. He has worked in R&D, tax credits, in the mergers and acquisitions group at BCE, as well as in the strategy group at KPMG Consulting, and with technology companies as an engineer. Mike holds a BA-SC in engineering from the University of Waterloo, an MBA from the University of British Columbia, and the CFA designation. He was selected as one of 25 emerging entrepreneurs by the Bronfman Foundation, Entrepreneur of the Year by CFO Canada, and co-winner for Quebec of the Startup Canada Award for Entrepreneurship Promotion. And last but not least, as they say, is Trevor Munn, and I'm going to read Trevor's bio off my screen, so apologies. Trevor's a master coach and one of the co-founders of Rhapsody Strategies. He works with leaders and executives who are focused on genuinely transforming their organizations and themselves. Prior to Rhapsody, Trevor was the Director of National Security and Public Safety at the Conference Board of Canada and a Principal Strategy Consultant at PwC. He's worked in boardrooms around the world. He's an avid cook, an identical twin, and a proud father and husband. And that's just a touch of what these three gentlemen have accomplished in their lives. As I said, an amazing opportunity to have them with us for 90 minutes. I guess, as Wendy said, I'm probably the best guinea pig in a matter of speaking as a moderator, in that I've been through this mill where many of our listeners are just embarking on this journey. I've been through it. I've been beat up by it, and I've been celebrated by it, and have really experienced all range of emotions and problems, both practical and emotional. Maybe I'd like to begin by talking about the issues that I had that I hope are common among new entrepreneurs or those who are contemplating entrepreneurship. And they touch on each of the areas that these gentlemen are expert in. And clearly, funding was among the top three concerns that I had starting a business. I began a business that required extensive funding, and so I ran right up against funding right from the get-go as soon as I had the idea that I wanted to pursue. Transitioning from employee to entrepreneur was a challenge for me. I've been an employee for 40 years. That's a lot of employee training, so to speak. And flicking the switch to becoming an entrepreneur, as they say, literally overnight, was an extremely challenging issue for me in many ways, practical and otherwise. And coaching. I had no coaching. I know this was only 9 years ago for me. It's not a lifetime ago, but there seems to have developed an enormous body of literature and work, et cetera, in this past decade for a variety of reasons. And I think, if I were starting out today, I would have had so many more opportunities. Well, certainly I'd be a lot wiser for coaching. I had no coaching, and I learned by trial and error and mimicking what I thought was good, and tossing aside what I thought was bad. So my issues were the very issues that you gentlemen make your life's work in. And maybe this is a good opportunity to get a chance for each of you to kind of address my point, but I hope my point is a universal point in a sense. So maybe start with you, Mike. I started with the funding as my issue, so I think you'd be the right one to turn to.
Sure. Well, I think funding normally comes up as, number one or number two for most businesses as being the problem, because, you need to invest before you're going to get those returns out of it. From what I've seen in working in this area for a number of years, the first and probably most important thing is to really be systematic about it, and be a young entrepreneur, someone in the middle ages or someone in later stages. I think it's always the same trap people can fall into, is not just to say, hey, I want money, go get money tomorrow. It doesn't really work that way. So I kind of see it, if I break it down a bit, is there's kind of this pre-funding phase, and then there's a funding phase. So the pre-funding phase, before you even think about going and get all that money, you really want to make sure your idea makes sense. We'll call this product market fit. You want to make sure there's some kind of demand out there. And generally speaking, you don't need to get any funding for that, or very little to really at least test it out at the beginning. So I would suggest trying to figure that out first, and be it through surveys, be it through kind of a PowerPoint that looks like a website, be it through just a lot of research. Try and figure out, is there actually a demand for this product? And there's so many ways, especially today with the internet, to kind of figure these things out. So start with that. The second thing is to build a team. And I think, be it very young again or very old, it's the same challenge. You need to really, you're going to build a company that is going to be of more than just a kind of a home business. You're going to need a team. You're going to need a few people, and trying to get that team together before you get the funding is going to make things a lot easier. It also kind of reduces the risk that your idea doesn't really make sense. You have someone to bounce it off with, so it is a good thing. And I think if you go for a big round of investment, it's almost an absolute necessity, in that investors are always going to say, hey, what happens if someone gets hit by a bus? So there's always some redundancy within the team, or there is a team. So that's kind of the second pre-funding. And the third thing I would say would be, and this is kind of ironic, but you need a little bit of money to go get some money. So you need some money to survive. You need some money to kind of do the little things you need to do to go to kind of raise money. So these three steps are what I consider kind of the pre-funding. And I think everyone should be going through those steps as kind of a pre-funding. If I go to the next stage where you say, okay, now I'm going to get funding, the first thing to look at is government funding. Depending on what country you're in and what environment you're in, there may be more or less, but to look at that, because that is the cheapest form. And I'm talking about going at the government money that makes sense, not the $300 here, the $500 there, which takes you a lot of time to do, may not be worth it. But hey, if there's a $50,000, $100,000 or more available, go get that. In this day and age, there actually is a lot. It's actually, in some ways, a great time to start a business, because there's lots of money being put out there by the government. So make sure to go through that checklist. It's the cheapest money you'll ever get. So kind of get that money. The next stage is to go look at bank financing. That bank financing is not as sexy as angel investors or VCs, but it's cheaper and it's easier to go get. So you've got to go look at that. Is it something you can get or cannot? You have to make some smart decisions, though. If you say, listen, I'm going to go get the bank funding, but I'm going to mortgage my house again, and I'm a certain point in my life where I'm not necessarily comfortable with that, make sure you're comfortable with those decisions. Obviously, you're kind of kind of the baseline you want to work from, your values, you have to make sure you protect those first, but then go get some financing. So the bank would be one. And then the last place you want to go, and it's funny, I kind of say it as the least desirable, because often when you read the newspapers, it seems like the most exciting is the VC money. Or along with that, the angel money. That's going to be the most expensive. It's going to be the most complicated as well, long term. But if it is necessary, you go get that. So those are kind of the steps I think a lot of businesses should follow. And it's perhaps in the funding side, the area I see most people making some mistakes and saying, hey, I need some money. Let me go talk to that VC. If you listen to that, that's kind of like step 6. Like a few other steps along the way you should hit. And even if you say, listen, I need $5 million to make this business work, it's still going to be so much easier if you kind of thought it through. You have a little bit of a team, a little bit of money, maybe picked up a little bit of government funding, and there's some nice reference points, and then maybe a loan or two, and then you go to get that big money. So I would very much suggest that people go through these steps, be thoughtful in the way they do fundraising, and it is hard work. It does take a lot. Paul, you went through it, and it's not an easy thing, but at the end of the day, if it's done properly, it can be very rewarding.
Thank you. What I would add to that, just from my own experience, but it may apply to a number of the folks that are listening. The money that we were trying to raise was for brick and mortar, was money for construction of a facility, a manufacturing facility in Northern California. And it was, we were still in a recession, 2008, 2009. This wasn't much after that. There wasn't much of an appetite for lending, for investing in a first-time senior entrepreneur who wanted to build a facility that had absolutely nothing to do with the tech industry. And in California, everyone has these wonderful tech opportunities to invest in. But we were too stupid to know that, so we continued to look for money and found none. What we decided to do in lieu of building our own manufacturing was to outsource our manufacturing. We thought it would be a temporary solution because there was no investment involved in it, and there were folks that were very good at what we needed them to be good at. And we thought we would use that as a temporary measure until we could raise the money and attract investors, et cetera. Long story short, we never went back for money. We've continued to outsource for 9 years. We have the best set of partners in the world, and we wouldn't change it for anything. So it turned out to be a blessing in disguise for us. But the bottom line is outsourcing. When you just can't raise the money to do what you want to do, there are other people that can do part of what you want to do. Look to them.
Smart.
I think I got lucky.
I think I'm going to jump in here. I think it's very, very important that you do collaborate and outsource whenever you can. We can't do everything alone. You have to be able to ask for that help, and don't be ashamed to ask for it. Most people who are entrepreneurs want to help other entrepreneurs, and always remember that. I mean, I said in my book, whenever I wrote the book, I know a little bit about everything, but I don't know much about it all. And so how can you write a book that you are a guide to helping people start a business when you don't have all the information? And that's why I reached out to 29 people, and they all jumped on board and wanted to be part of it. So message is collaborate, and don't be afraid to ask for help, especially when it comes to financing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think in some ways too, I kind of talked about building a team. Well, often the team involves, especially an early stage company, would be subcontractors or partners or others. You can't even afford an employee at the beginning, right? So I think that's,
Yeah.
And hats off to you. You kind of figured it out, Paul, and that's obviously did great with it.
Thank you. Maybe move on now, Andy. I'd love for you to contribute here on that which is your expertise. Stepping, as Wendy phrased it in her messages to each of us, stepping out of your comfort zone, which I'm sure doesn't begin to describe the kind of work that you do, but I think we all get what Wendy meant by that. And please take the floor here and talk about what this means to a new entrepreneur.
Sure. So thank you so much, first of all, Paul and Wendy, for including me, and it's nice to see all of you here from all around the world. So I'll describe to you a little bit about what my work is, and then I'll connect it to our conversation. So I'm an organizational behavior specialist with an expertise in psychology and sort of I would say the personal and psychological side of transitioning into a new role, into a new identity, into a new endeavor, as we're talking about. And if you think about it, there's so many different types of transitions that you can imagine, and so many different types of situations that you could either anticipate finding yourself in, or actually finding yourself in. So some of this is anticipatory, in other words, thinking what it might be like and having a reaction to that. And some of it might be in the moment, having a reaction to that. And either way, you can feel sort of that poignant sense that you're stepping outside your comfort zone, and some people sometimes struggle with these feelings that I'll explain in a moment. So if you think about it, as I was listening to the conversation, in some cases you're moving from, as Paul's example was, moving from an employee to an owner, right? Or maybe moving from being managed to managing, or maybe moving from being a follower to a leader. You find yourself in situations where Wendy just mentioned the idea of asking for help a moment ago. That's not easy for everyone to ask for help, right? So that's an example of a situation that could be sort of, easier said than done, potentially. You might need to, as Mike was talking about, meeting with people who might be willing to invest in your business, but essentially from your perspective, that's kind of pitching your business to others, sort of selling yourself and your business, which many people, many of us, me included, aren't always so comfortable selling ourselves in a sense. As crass as that might seem, that's the bottom line, is that you are essentially selling yourself. You're selling your ideas, your potential, and so on, and that can be challenging for some people. You need to. We talked about. I think Mike talked about the idea of building a team. How do you build a team? You probably have to do some networking, right? In networking, in making small talk with people to kick off conversations and then to deepen them through networking, whether it's on LinkedIn or in person or whatever it is, or virtual now. That's outside of a lot of people's comfort zones. And then once you step into a role and you do build a team, you might need to be delivering feedback, receiving feedback, having difficult conversations, a full range of activities that from your vantage point now as an owner of a budding small business that could become a budding larger business, any one of these things could be outside your comfort zone. I've done a lot of work in this area, and I wrote a book that Wendy and Paul referred to. It came out in 2017. It's called Reach, about stepping outside your comfort zone. And for that book, I relied on my own research that I've done for years, plus others' research, and also for the book, I did a new set of interviews with 75 different people from all sorts of professions, some entrepreneurs for sure, but not exclusively entrepreneurs, people from all different backgrounds, stages in life, professions, and so on, and all sorts of situations. And I was curious in that book about a number of things, and I'll share one of them with you here just to kick us off. And one of the things that I focused on in that book was what can hold people back. What are I called them psychological roadblocks. And what did I find that was common across all these cases of all these people in all these situations who were in one way or another stepping outside their comfort zone? And so what were the psychological roadblocks? The first one, and incidentally, I'm not suggesting that you will always experience all of these psychological roadblocks every single time you consider something, but this could be a set of things that could help guide you to understand what your feelings are and what might be holding you back. So the first one is authenticity. This doesn't feel like who I am. This doesn't feel like me. Having to step in front of a group of investors and pitch your ideas, for instance. This isn't me. This isn't who I am. This does not feel authentic, right? That could be a roadblock. And then, of course, there are corresponding emotions that might be connected to that, such as anxiety, let's say. A second issue that I found quite common was, and I called it the likability roadblock. Now, remember, you're experimenting with a new version of yourself, in a sense. You're transitioning, you're changing, you're adapting, you're stepping outside your comfort zone. What if people don't like this new version of me? This potentially, I don't know, in the case we were talking about pitching your business, this sort of self-promotional version of me. Or let's say you're at your business now and you need to sort of take control in a meeting, but you're not a real take control kind of person. What if people don't like this assertive version of me? Or you have to deliver bad news and that's not your go-to way. You're more of a people pleaser. You don't like to deliver bad news. Who does? And so, what if people don't like that version of me, and so on. And so as you experiment with a different version of yourself, and likability can be at stake. Your own experience, your subjective experience of likability. So you've got authenticity, you've got likability, we've got competence. That's number 3, competence. What if you're not good at it? What if you feel like a fool? What if you feel incompetent? And there's, of course, a public and a private side to competence. What if you look like a fool as well? So you can feel it inside, and you can also imagine what other people might see you as, sort of through the looking glass. So that's the competence roadblock. So we've got authenticity, likability, competence. A fourth one is resentment. Resentment. Sometimes, logically, you might know that you need to sort of make small talk and make chit chat and be friendly and be well liked and schmooze people in order to get them to consider your business. But maybe you hate doing that. Maybe that's just not your thing. It feels so superficial to have to do that. And you've got a good business plan. You've got a good business idea. You might feel resentful that you have to do, like, logically you understand it logically, but psychologically you might feel resentful that this is what it takes, right? So that's a fourth one. Then the final one, and I don't suspect that this one would pop up as much here in this context, but what I found is morality. So you've got authenticity, likability, competence, resentment, and then morality. Morality, you might feel you're doing something wrong when stepping outside your comfort zone. I actually, speaking of entrepreneurs, I opened my book Reach with a story of a young entrepreneur who ended up having to fire her best friend from her business a couple months into it. And she felt a morality conflict in that context, among other things. So all I'm offering here is sort of like a way to sort of make sense of some of the psychological challenges that you might experience when having to step outside your comfort zone to do any of the things that Mike had talked about and Paul had talked about and Wendy had talked about. And so I'll stop there. That's my little tidbit initial contribution.
Andy, two things that I learned about myself, and I think many of us, or maybe all of us, we tend to think if we're feeling it, that this is a universal thing, that everyone experiences this, but I really don't know if it's universal at all, but it does seem like a general truth. I found that I have a partner. She joined the business shortly after I launched it. And I think it makes all the difference in the world to me, and I wonder how true it is for everyone, to have someone to celebrate with, someone to cry with. Everything seems better with a partner. Assuming, of course, this is somebody where you're on the same plane ethically and emotionally, etc. I can't imagine doing this by myself. It would. I don't know that it would be lonely, but it just wouldn't be as much fun. There's just so much your family can take of you talking about your business constantly with them.
Yeah.
You run out of family pretty fast. In fact, if it's children, you can measure it with a stopwatch, I'm sure. So I think it's great having a partner. Yes, it does mean sharing the wealth, but that's not an issue for me, and I suspect that's true for a lot of folks too. The other universal thing that I guess did kind of surprise me, but it made perfect sense, is that a lot of people think when they're starting a bit, especially if they're starting a business because they've been in some grind for the last 35 years, and like many of us, they hated the last 5 years. They were tired, humiliated, bored, whatever it was, and they feel like they have to do something different, fresh. They have to take up carpentry or something. And in my case, I'm doing exactly what I did for the last 40 years. I'm just not doing it for the man. I'm doing it for me. And I was kind of surprised at how much I enjoyed it, because I did loathe the last few years of my career, and it had nothing to do with the work itself. It just where I was emotionally, I suppose. But I am literally doing the same thing I was doing, except doing it as an entrepreneur, not as an employee. And after my TED talk, I became an expert, and I didn't have much advice to give people. But that is one of the things I said. Like, don't feel, if you've been a CPA for 40 years, that you have to become, a bluegrass singer. I mean, you can be a CPA for your own CPA firm and get an enormous amount of satisfaction from it. Are these things universal truths, Andy?
I, like you, I don't know if I'm an expert in that question. They sound sensible to me, especially the partner part. I mean, both of your points sound very sensible. The partner part is not something that I see just in the world of entrepreneurs. I mean, for my book, Reach, for instance, I studied police officers is one of the many professions, and I actually went I spent a day in the cop car driving around as people were had to perform evictions, these police officers. And I noticed in those moments how important it was that they traveled in pairs for safety reasons too, but also for more camaraderie and psychological reasons. I mean, you said as you share in the, and it's not just police officers, it's many other professions as well. You see this, you share in the joy, you share in the sadness, you have someone to experience something with, you have someone to help sort of help with your sense making. You share the accountability as well, the burden to some degree, which I think is important as well. So I mean, I think that I see that as well. You see that in academics too, frankly. A lot of people write together, work together. So I think there is some universality to that as well. So I appreciate your points.
Good, thank you, thank you. Trevor, next in line. Please, I'm sure you've had a chance to connect a lot of dots listening to the earlier people speaking. But please share with us, how what we're talking about touches on the work you do, and let us share in the wisdom that you've acquired over the years.
Well, thanks, Paul. Frankly, conversations like these, I could listen as much as contribute. They're just so rich, and I deeply appreciate every word that I've heard so far. And it's nice to see some familiar faces in here as well. Some I haven't seen in a while, so that's really that's a real treat for me. So thank you for that. The notion of partnership, I think, is incredibly important. I'm blessed. I've got two amazing business partners that I work with. We actually have a shared leadership model. So it's not a conventional kind of approach around it. It requires a lot of navigation, but it comes from the strength of that partnership. And because doing this stuff is tough. It is really tough. And doing it alone is brutal, or can be. It's really got the risk for that. And so much of the work that we do with our clients, we're working with a lot of individuals who are doing this all on their own. And they can't go home and talk about it with their partner, with their spouse. The family, at a certain point has a certain tolerance, before they don't want to hear it anymore. And honestly, if things are tough and if the business of the organization is at risk, kind of hard to come home saying, gee, you know what, by the way, I don't know if we're going to make it. Right? There's some parts where you want to navigate a little bit your accountabilities around that to say, okay, what goes on there? The other challenge is so many of our friends don't get it. Right? When we step out of that role from being an employee in an organization to truly running one, it is a different exercise, right? We can spend a long time in a career and we can play armchair owner and armchair leader for a long time. And we got a lot of ideas and insights about how things ought to be, but it's different when you sit in that chair and suddenly you got to make these decisions, right? When you have to lay off your best friend, when you got to let someone go, when you've got to cut a chunk of the business away, when you've got to make these difficult decisions, you can, I've worked with people, or people have worked, I guess, for me, who I've been very, very close to, and there are boundaries that you can't talk about, right? There are elements that you just can't be as open as you were before. And so sometimes that can really close in for people, and they can feel very, very alone in this. And sometimes what we've done is just traded off what we thought was going to be an amazing experience, saying, you know what, I'm going to take this thing I do, and I'm not going to do it for them. I'm going to do it for me because I know how to do this, and I can see the dollars and cents, and I can see I can make some money here. I know what the margin is between what I'm charging and what I'm getting paid. What we tend not to take into account is all of the other stuff that comes with it, and the transition that's required not to do the work. Right. And in fact, if it's the creation of a product or delivery of a service and it's something we've done for a long time, that's the least of your worries, right? The challenge of the business is not actually how to deliver it. It's actually how to structure the business, organize the business, run the business, drive the business. Mike, one of the first things he said was he talked about systems, and my heart leapt. I love systems. Because without them, it's, you get this methodless enthusiasm where people are all over the place, expending a huge amount of energy and time and resources on things that aren't making a difference, right? And getting the order and the sequence of things right is incredibly important. So I think the capacity to do that and do that effectively will really shape what happens. You know, Wendy, I know you said at the beginning, like, you know, you weren't going to talk about COVID too much. It's our reality right now. I mean, it's here, we're living with it, and it's bringing a lot of change for a lot of people, right? For some, it's good. Honestly, I have clients who, you know, we have one client, they run a security company, and everyone wants security right now. So they're booming. They got all these problems. They're stressed to the gills because they can't meet the needs and expectations. I've got others who, you know, their business is basically shut down. They're stressed to the gills because they're not sure how they're going to solve this problem. Totally different kinds of stress, both trying to figure out how do we proceed as we go forward. And the reason I raise it is because sometimes we choose change, and sometimes change chooses us. And there's a point where we just have to recognize we're being chosen, right? It is great to actually say, you know what, I'm due for a change. I'm gonna create my thing, go do my thing, live my dream, you know, follow my passion, you know, all of that stuff, all the stuff we hear all the time. But there are other points in time where change really has chosen us. And this is the reality for a lot of people right now who are losing their jobs, who are seeing their industry transformed, who are uncertain about whether or not the skills they had before are going to be relevant afterwards, right? All of these things are happening. And I think you know, to Andy's point, how we're thinking and processing this experience will determine how we can navigate it and where we end up in the end, whether both at a kind of an intellectual level, but also at a psychosocial level, to be able to, how we choose our way through this is going to determine whether or not we can, whether this is going to be a setback or some kind of comeback. Right? Because some people will go through these and they will end up wounded for a long time. And that will become their story going forward, is that, you know, this happened, it was unfair. You know, I think you made reference to, Paul, to launching during a recession. It's my favorite time to launch. It's great. Because the business model that works in a recession works out of a recession real well. So, you know, if you can get the math right, if you can get the numbers right for your business and the structure and the process so that it'll work in, you know, we talked about 2008, 2009 in your case, Paul, but as we're going into, you know, what, you know, probably at best I could describe as a soft economy that we're going into, let alone, you know, the R word, the recession has been coming out again. We just don't know what the implications are going to be, but it's not going to be the bull market that we've been in the midst of for the last 10 years. That the models that we're able to build, if they can work in this context, have the opportunity to work well into the future. But we have to really be choosing to do this. At a certain point, no matter what's happened to us, around us, maybe because of us, and suddenly we've got to make a change. If change has chosen us and we're like, okay, I guess I got no choice here, there is a choice. And I think that's the key thing, is you got to choose to say, okay, regardless of the circumstances, I'm not going to blame all of this stuff. I'm going to step fully into this, recognizing I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the skills. I don't have all the abilities yet. I don't have all the relationships. But to do it, and this is where I think to do it with a team that cares about you, to do it with advisors who can guide you well, you know, I think having those pieces there are incredibly important. The other thing I might add to that is when people talk about becoming an entrepreneur, there's kind of this notion that there's like, it's one thing. Entrepreneur tends to be in the singular. We kind of go, I'm going to become an entrepreneur now. It's like saying, I'm going to become a doctor. Kind of go, and I have a picture of what a doctor is, and we have a pretty common picture of what a doctor is. But entrepreneur's not like that. There's not just one. And the risk is, you know, Paul, you talked about kind of mimicking the behaviors of others and bringing that to bear in terms of how we go forward. And I think there's value kind of looking for good ideas and say, oh, I like that. The trick is you have to be you. Don't try to be someone else. Don't try to be the version of entrepreneur you think you ought to be in order to accomplish something. You need to be your version of it, and trust that the expression of who you are is actually going to really, really help you. Certainly from a branding perspective and from a values and from a mission vision perspective, those core foundational elements in the organization, those are critical. But when the reason we don't want to just mimic others is, one is because it doesn't really work. There's no single model. It's going to vary. Your circumstances are going to vary so much. And second, it goes to this point that Andy's raising around authenticity. It's not even me, it's someone else. I'm being what I think someone else's version of an entrepreneur ought to be, so that they'll think I have the credibility to do what I want to do. It gets convoluted a little quickly, which is why getting really grounded in yourself, who you are, what makes you tick, what you really need, and then to be really honest about what you're not good at, or where the gaps are, but to recognize it's not a limitation, it's not a failure. It's just saying, I'm stepping into a new thing. There's a bunch of new things I need. There's a bunch of new skills I need to develop. And some of them are going to be really uncomfortable. And other ones are going to be really exciting. And I think just maintaining that authenticity, and Andy, I'm thrilled you raised it, because I think it's so incredibly important to be really grounded, because it's tough, right? When we're an employee and we kind of go, oh, we had a good day, oh, we had a bad day, or we had a good quarter, we had a bad quarter. That's not what it's like as an entrepreneur. That'd be awesome. I'd love that. Even if you did over a day, it's, a day you have, ups and downs within the course of a day. And even that, I go, oh, I'd love that. The life of an entrepreneur is it's happening in the same moment, right? You're closing the biggest deal and, doing some of the hardest stuff, and you're plagued with doubt and excitement and joy and fulfillment and loss and confusion all in the same moment. Right. And I think being able to hang on to all of that, if you're in a place where you're not really grounded in who you are, that stuff will blow you away in no time at all.
That was good. Everything you said resonated with me. Especially, I don't put too much stock in my comments about mimicking others. I could never get out of my own way. So I think being authentic is, whether authentic is good or not, in my case, I do manage to remain authentic. I've kept my mimicking to a minimum. I would say harmless mimicking, or maybe tactical mimicking. But
well, Paul, you're speaking to an identical twin. Right?
Yeah.
I know. My major study in life is probably about differentiation. Right?
Exactly.
Well, what makes this different from that, right? And it's really, really important, because we're doing work with a big national brand, and they have offices all over the place, but they're run individually, they're run locally. But what's interesting is same brand, same product, same policy, same process, same everything, and every one of those branches is run totally differently.
Wow.
So the what is the same. What distinguishes them is the how. Because they literally have to use the same form, same building, same logo, they got all the same rules, but how they express them is what differentiates them. So some people go, I want to launch a business in this, but there's already one. I'm like, it should not stop you ever, right? The fact that someone's already there is not the end. We can say, well, it's capitalism, so competition is part of it, and it's healthy. The trick is, if there was only one, right? What's critical is focusing on how you're going to do it, because that is what's going to truly differentiate you.
Wendy, I just had a final thought to add to Trevor about your book. Something that's like written between the lines of every chapter that I think bears articulating to the audience is something I only learned after my TED Talk. As Wendy said, I got an enormous outpouring. It really touched a nerve, especially almost exclusively among seniors, or those who were approaching approaching their senior years and thinking of entrepreneurism. But I got one response, literally one out of over 2 million, from a corporation. It was from the largest life insurance company in the world, which was unfamiliar to me because I didn't know them by their name in Europe, called Aegon, A-E-G-O-N. And I guess a lot of folks are familiar with them, but in North America, they're known as Transamerica. And that's the name of our tower here in San Francisco. they wrote to me because they wanted to point out, I guess these were two researchers at Aegon. They wanted to know if I recognized that what I was doing was the best thing I could possibly do to extend my life. And you know, which you know, I said, please tell me in the richness of your life. Now, you may find it tedious and challenging and frustrating, but you are maintaining a richness for your mental and psychological life that most people, actually, at the same time in their careers and their lifespans, they're sort of checking out. Even playing golf every day and getting in all that great cardiovascular work, they're still checking out psychologically, and it's not good. No matter how many rounds of golf they play, it's not good that your heart is fine but your head is not. And what you're doing is going to extend your life, as long as you play a little bit of golf to complement that, which was really thrilling to me to learn that, yeah, what I was doing turns out was great for me. And now, you know, 3 years beyond my TED Talk, I feel the same way, if not better. So they were absolutely right. It's good for you. Take up entrepreneurism. It's an enormous challenge, but my God, it's great medicine. You know, that was a surprise to me. You know, I would have thought that it was just, you know, a stress creator and it was going to kill you in the end, you know, way before you wanted to move on. But it turns out if you manage it correctly, it's just great medicine for your mind.
Yeah, Paul, if I can add in, I think one advantage that entrepreneurs over 50 have is that they do know themselves better. They do know where they want to go. They do. Someone said they do know what their passion is, and I think to kind of go on with Trevor had, I think you have that choice, that personal choice, and if you can move from the need to do it to the like to do it to the love to do it, no doubt it will extend your life, and it will just be, even the present moment will just be better. That doesn't mean there's not going to be a lot of hard work and a lot of long days, but yeah, if you can put that together and have purpose, you know, it's amazing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sorry, Wendy, please.
No, that's all right. So my question to, I mean, Mike, yes, we all know about the financing, but, you know, Andy and Trevor, what you said is very true. But my question to you is, so people that may have been laid off their job, while expecting to be laid off their job, and they are in their 50s or 60s, and you know, that they're basically being forced into entrepreneurship because it's the only option for them. And so they aren't going to be confident at all. You know, you've got your different levels of personalities of people, right? And so if you're forced into doing something that you don't necessarily want to do, but you have to do it, how can you start very easily getting in and, you know, trying to have the confidence of transitioning and, you know, being comfortable without having, you know, all of the, like, it just in a very short period of time, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. You know, somebody has to be able to say, okay, yes, you have to do this, but let's make it as easy as possible and get you comfortable as quickly as possible. How do you do that?
I'll offer a couple of thoughts, and then, you know, Andy will give you the right answer. I think first off, I'm not sure comfort is where you're headed. Right. I mean,
Yeah.
There's a certain point where, you know, in a situation like that, you're going to have to accept that there will be discomfort or it will be uncomfortable because so many things do need to change, right? And it's being brought on you. The first and the most important thing is, you know, and when I'm working with clients, and sometimes it's with an executive, they're trying to figure out, do I stay or do I go? Do I want to stay here or do I want to leave? And I say, well, you know, in one way, you've got four choices. You can stay or you can go, and I always say you have to follow this to the end, or you can stay and you can go. And the savvy ones go, I'm pretty sure that's just two choices. I said, nope, because there's another layer of choice that goes with this stay and go. You can stay and be happy, or you can leave and be happy. You can stay and be miserable, or you can leave and be miserable. Right. So we had a situation with Paul, who was staying in his job and was miserable. Right. In the later years, you described that, Paul, saying, I was staying and miserable, and here's where I was. Then you were forced to leave, and you've got to choose. You've got to choose. Am I going to find happiness here? Or am I going to continue to be miserable? And honestly, the first thing I get clients to focus on is choose that first. Choose happy or miserable first. Wherever you are, decide how are you going to do this. And this, honestly, this works in a relationship. It works in your work. It works in any circumstances where you got a situation where you got to make a call on it. The first and foremost thing is to say, you know what, I'm going to choose, regardless of what happens, I'm going to choose to find joy here or find happiness. It's going to be hard. It's going to be confusing. I'm going to be lost. I'm going to get some help, but I'm going to keep finding that there. Because a lot of people, if they don't make that choice, they will default to miserable. And they will burn a ton of time going, this isn't fair. This is BS. This is crap. They treated me wrong. How can they do this so long? Like all of that stuff. And that will become the overarching mindset of that person. Now imagine you want to be a client of that person, and that's the head trash they're carrying around with. How effective do you think they're going to be in selling the business, selling the product, marketing it, attracting money, attracting talent? Not well at all. Not good. You've got to, at a certain point, you have to accept it and kind of go, okay, you can say this is BS and mourn it, grieve it, be angry, all of that. But then make the choice to say, all right, this is my path. Let's go. Let's go. And start to pull in the people that you need who are going to support you. And no matter how small you start, you have to do that first. You have to do that first. Otherwise, you're going to get caught in this thing. And, and I've seen people where it has really destroyed the rest of their lives. Right? They have just been ground down the whole way through. And I've seen others who will go, yep, that was my moment of growth. And it wasn't my idea, but I like where I am now.
It's taking that jump. It is having that confidence to.
Even without confidence, right? Like at a certain.
The confidence to take the first step, though.
You just have to. Yeah, absolutely.
Andy, did you want to add anything to that? Andy, you're muted.
Yeah, no,
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm unmuting you. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, am I unmuted now? Am I good? Yeah. So, Wendy, actually, I did have something to say. I just want to clarify, what was your original question, just so I can answer the right question?
Sure. Okay. So we've got all different levels of personalities and confidence, and there's people that are being forced into starting a business because it's their only option, but they aren't an outgoing person. They are, in their kind of like, you have to get them out of the cocoon. I guess that's the best way. I always like to use that cocoon. So they're in this cocoon, they don't know where to go, what to do, and they don't they just are afraid. They just don't have that confidence to basically go and ask for help.
So I think that one thing that's really important is developing sort of the conviction, your sense of why. Why is this important to me? Why would becoming an entrepreneur matter to me? Why is this important for me? What's my source of conviction despite the fact that I might be anxious about it, it might be well outside my comfort zone, I might not know where to start, I might not know anyone who could coach me like Trevor, who could help me find financing like Mike, who could give me incredible advice like Paul or you. What's my source of conviction for why doing something like this might matter to me, and then ultimately why a particular single idea might be worthwhile for me to pursue, like why this particular idea. So that's one reaction I have. Another reaction is that you mentioned comfort, and I agree with Trevor. I don't think comfort is necessarily where you're headed necessarily. I do think that confidence is important. And I think that confidence is like a muscle. It's sort of like something that you'll build. It's sort of like the idea that you decide that you want to become a marathon runner, or maybe even just run a 5K. and you're not going to get off the couch. You know, you've probably heard of this idea of couch to 5K or couch to 10K. There are these programs, I guess. I'm not a runner, but I've heard of them. So I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think you like literally get off the couch and run the 10K. I think it's a process. And like the first time you're walking around the neighborhood, and that's your first step. And then the next step is that you're walking around the neighborhood, but then for 20 seconds you're jogging, and so on and so forth, and that you're building it up, and that your sense of, like, literally in that case, you're building up your muscles. But I think self-efficacy and confidence is something that you can also conceptualize as a muscle as well. So you're starting slow, you're building up over time, and I think it's creating those steps for yourself in a smart way by buying a book like yours, getting advice from others, setting yourself up for success, and then understanding that it's going to be a stepwise progression to where you want to go.
Okay. All right. And there was just one other thing that I wanted to bring up. Somebody was talking about it in the chat here. You know, we keep saying, I think everybody agrees that, you know, your family doesn't want to listen to everything that you're talking about your business. But it is really important that you have their support whenever you are starting a business. I mean, they have to know what you're going to be doing. They have to, you know, are you going to be using your own financing? Are they in agreement with that? And I'm going to say this, and I don't know how true it is, but, you know, most people are probably, well, we all are working remotely now, but I have always worked from home, and I enjoy working from home. So that may be, you know, what a lot of people will do. And so it is, you know, being in the same house with someone, and I'm an example of I'm here in my home. My husband is retired, and I work. I love what I do. But it's actually finding that time of, you know, family time. You have to have the time to be able to walk away from your desk and keep the marriage happy. How's that? And they do have to have your support. And when my husband doesn't want to hear what I'm saying, he takes his hearing aids out. That's how he solves it here. Only kidding about that. But, you know, I just, you know, you do have to have the support of your family, whatever you're going to be doing. Paul, over to you.
Just wondering if you've gotten any questions from the audience that you wanted to
I'm just
have.
going through the chat here
Sure.
and seeing. One of them was, sometimes you don't have a choice. It's, okay, some links in here. Staying positive is the key. I don't see any questions. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? Put them in the chat box, or raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can ask the question that way.
At one point, I'll add on to what Trevor was saying before. I think now is actually an excellent time to start a business. And one reason is if it works now, it will work when things are going well. But the other thing is that it's a really good time to hire people. It's a really good time. People have a lot of free time. It's a good time to test ideas on people. There's this kind of ability now to do things that you normally can't do. You know, in a lot of ways, it may be a good time to invest soon as, you know, the markets get really unchoppy. So I think it's a really good time, and it's one we may not see again in our lifetime to be this good. So I think there are lots of opportunities now, and, you know, I think with the advice we're getting from, you know, Andy and Trevor and Paul, and from your book as well, I think take those ideas. There are things that can be done now, and the timing of the book in many ways is perfect.
Yes, it is perfect. Fortunately and unfortunately, because we know that most people that are going to be laid off are the ones that are just getting close to retirement. I know that I heard somebody the other day that they have been asked to take early retirement. They don't want to take it, but they're not going to have any choice in the matter, right? So that's why I'm trying to encourage them at least looking at entrepreneurship as an encore career. That's, you know, give them the option. Give them the option. And, you know, the book, I mean, you're all saying great things about my book, and thank you. But my neighbors have been talking for years about starting their own business once they retire. They can't wait. Well, they got the book, and I said, so what are you thinking? He says, I didn't think it was going to be this hard. I didn't think I had to do that many things.
That's why people start businesses, because they have no idea.
That's right. But they'll make it through it.
You know, it's interesting around that, because Mike makes a really important point. Is in our current context, so many of the rules, systems, structures, and approaches are up for grabs. You can pretty much, and even with clients, we're working with them. And one of the questions we're saying is, what is COVID-19 revealing about you as a leader, about your team, about your business, your organization? And then one of the questions we'll say, what's one of the things you've always wanted to change, but could never, could just never get done? And I had one client, like at one end of the continuum, very simple. She said, I hate taking cash. She said, cash is such a pain to have to manage and process, and I got to count it, and I got to, like, it creates all these other exercises. I said, then get rid of cash. Tell your customers, sorry, we don't do cash anymore. It's all touchless, COVID-19, because of COVID. I said, just put because of COVID after every change you want to make right now. And, in a way, there's an opportunity. At another level, there's a massive, massive IT company where the CIO has been fighting with legal for 2 years to implement electronic signatures of documents. And he's losing. Legal is beating him, right? He's getting nowhere. 5 days it took. 5 days, suddenly, everything has been changed, all e-signatures. Like there's a space right now to do things and to throw things up for grabs that we've understood in the past as normal and say, not so normal right now. And I think actually that applies to us. And the opportunity here, if I use that, and I struggle with the, never let an opportunity go to waste, or crisis go to waste, all of that. I think we always need to keep looking to say, in this context, what can I do and use that's good? And this is part of the dynamic, is you can throw things are up for grabs a little bit. The rules are not the same. And so as leaders, the failed opportunity would be to not act on those. It would be just like, well, let's just wait and see. This is not a wait and see kind of moment. This is a time to rethink things and act. So it's time to choose, make a decision, act, adjust, decide, act, adjust. It's not a sit in the sidelines kind of way. And that momentum, to Annie's point, helps to build the confidence, right? Because if you use the running exercise or training, if you've ever worked with a trainer who goes, come on, one more, you do one more rep, and you go, I can't. And then they go, yes, you can. And then you do. What you really realize is you're wrong about your limits. You don't actually know what your limits are. Some part of you has a belief about what your limits are, but if all of a sudden you say, I can't, and somebody goes, yes, you can, and you go, okay, I'll try, no matter how grudgingly, and then all of a sudden you do one more, you realize you're actually not as clear on your boundaries and your limits as you think you are. And I think that's something important to hang on to here right now, is the rules are up for grabs, and you don't really know what your limits are.
Yeah.
Right? You're telling yourself what they are, but there's room to grow into it. And that repetition to help build that confidence, as Andy says, and to have those little bits, those steps, and kind of go, oh yeah, if that wasn't true, maybe this isn't either, right? It opens more opportunities and more doors for us.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to comment on one thing then in here, and I think it has a little bit, it's about taking some online courses and whatnot, and I'm just going to mention that for people that don't or have not purchased my book, I did these full interviews on 29 different topics. Each interview was about an hour in length, and tell a little funny story here. My book was going to be a video book until I started looking at all of the interviews I had done, and had nothing to do with any of the people that I interviewed. It was all to do with me. I could make lots and lots and lots of bloopers out of it. So I decided instead I would extract information and write the book in my own way. And these interviews were changed from videos to audio, and anybody that purchased the book has access to all of those in-depth interviews that goes much deeper than what the book does. And it's available, as I say, only for people that purchase the book. And you'll find out how to do so many things, like 29 different things. Will Trevor and Mike and Andy go in much more detail on where you should be going and what you should be doing to get you started. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that, because mine is kind of a little course. You're just listening, and there's a lot of templates and everything that go with it. Okay, so let me see. I'm just looking there. There doesn't seem to be. So no, there is not an audio book yet. There will be, but it isn't available yet. I was just trying to see who else has put something in here. Trevor, I know that you responded to a question, what is a VC? But just in case people aren't watching the chat here, VC stands for venture capital. Okay, and angel stands for small amounts of money. Smaller amounts of money, how's that? Is that a good way of putting it, Mike? Okay.
Yeah, sure, that's a good way. I think angel's often an individual, whereas a VC could be
okay. Did you, and I'm sorry, I'm going back and just asking you this question, because I don't think you touched on this, that, you know, an angel will take part ownership and a VC will take a larger part of your business?
Right, so really a difference between an angel and a VC. So an angel would be often just an individual. He may be part of a group of angels, but he'll come in. Angels will often invest even earlier than a venture capitalist. Sometimes it will be an investment more out of, they really enjoy that business. They know that business, they'll be into it for a while. A VC typically will come in, they're going to want to return over typically a more fixed deadline. Some of them are going to look for quite a large return. So it's a kind of a degree thing where angel is, typically a smaller amount of money, more patient. VC is a larger amount. You're really going for it with a VC. But at the end of the day, they're both equity investors. And a lot of ways these days, some angels are bigger than some VC funds, so they overlap a lot.
Okay. All right, there's a question here. It says, isn't WISE a group for senior entrepreneurs, business owners? It is, yes, it is. It is, my business is called WISE, seniorsandbusiness.com. I also have a couple of Facebook groups. So I think that you are asking about my company, and yeah, you can just go and find information. You don't have to join or anything else at this point. And that's what I'm all about.
Wendy, I had another.
Yes.
Don't remember why I didn't bring this up earlier when I was talking about the major concerns that I had at the beginning of the road. At the very, very early days of our business, we were part of a new business accelerator or an incubator, as they're called. Groups of small businesses, whether they're single owners or multiple founders, together with mentors and other folks that kind of help you get some traction and understand what needs to be done, et cetera. It was incredibly valuable for us. It was sponsored by a university. There was little if no cost to being involved in it, and we got some great advice. We were all brand new to this process, and we got some wonderful advice from folks that had achieved some level of success in business. And the one thing that was painfully evident to us and to many of the other incubated companies was sales. Most of us were not involved in sales in our previous lives. In fact, with all due respect, most of us had disdain for salespeople. We had them, we had pictures of them in our mind, and that's not what we wanted to be of ourselves. And as one of the mentors pointed out to us, because it was pretty clear that we were doing everything we could to avoid going into sales. And he pointed out to us, which I thought was, so painfully obvious, how the hell are you going to be successful if you don't sell something? Because we'd come back week after week with talks of our progress, but it had nothing to do with sales. I mean, it was everything but facing sales head on. And he just held our feet to the fire and said, you got to go out there and you're going to do more than just knock on that door. You have to keep going back. You have to bring me a sale, and I'm going to be on your back until you do. And that really woke us up. We had to become salespeople, and I'm still a dreadful salesperson, I think. And But one of my sales techniques is telling my client that I'm a dreadful salesperson. That puts them at ease. And uh, I found that it does work for me. Sorry. But no, seriously speaking, sales is really hard for people, especially, I mean, really hard for non-sales people. It's really hard. I gained a whole new respect for people who make their lives selling. And I mean, selling with integrity. I'm not talking about used cars or, you know, aluminum siding here. They're really good at what they do. They're technical experts. They're, you know, they're organizational experts. They know how to sell, and I guess I'm becoming better at it. But it's the heart of everything. If you don't make a sale, you have nothing to build your business on. I mean,
Okay, can I comment on that just for a second, Paul?
please.
Because we hear this all the time. And,
I know I saw you smile when I started.
Yeah, I was just like, oh my God. It's like, yes, I know this conversation, Paul. So many times, you know, new leaders will wrap them up in like pseudo sales, things that are kind of like sales, but not actually, because they don't want to do it. So they'll do lots of activity and lots of work, but they never actually want to get to the sales part. And it, you know, for those of you in Canada, you know, it's almost a dirty word to say you're in sales. Like, you know, it's like, oh, don't say that. We'll find lots of other ways to say what we do. I love to sell. I think it's fun and exciting, and I'm not I'm not a hyper aggressive, gotta win, keeping score, closing, like that. It's just not how I roll. But I think there's a moment in relationship that sales done right is a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's finding the authentic connection between what you care about deeply and the need someone else has. Something that's missing in their world, their business, or their life, where you can actually bring these two things together. And I think our job in sales is, as well, is to recognize when that's not happening and go, oh, nope, this isn't what you need, right? I'm not the person for you around it. And so being able to actually find that authentic connection, you know, Andy made such a powerful point, you know, earlier about getting really clear on your motivation around where is this coming from? What are you serving here? What is this about? And recognizing that every function and aspect of the business channels toward that. Sales has to, operations, HR, like every function, every area needs to lead to that, and they mutually support each other. And so, you know, you can do hey, you know, sales is the oxygen for the business, or that's the blood of the business, and without it, you're dead. I kind of go, okay, well, you know, I can say that about other parts of the business too. You know, if there's no people, it's a bit tricky. You know, but I think it's really important. Mike, not to downplay the money here, okay? I'm a big fan of bringing in the right money. But I think really being able to understand how this act of sales is an expression of your identity and your authenticity and the meaning of your business, right? Like that is the moment. And I think, you know, I've taken it as far in some presentations to say sales done well is an act of love.
Oh, wow.
Where we are together forming a powerful relationship that's going to last a long time in a way that's mutually beneficial, that fulfills us both, right? That is a good sale for me. In what we do, kind of in the world of, if I just call it coaching, it's a little more complicated than that and how we get into it. But you know, my view is ultimately everyone would benefit from coaching. I wish I'd had it way earlier in my life and in my career. And so my view is everyone needs it. The only question is, are they ready? So I'm not actually selling. I'm just going out kind of going, you ready? You know, it's a little more complicated than that. But you know, to just gauge that. And if they're not, it's like, awesome. You know, when you're ready, fantastic. And we provide all kinds of stuff to help people kind of get ready so that hopefully the day when that happens, they'll come to us. But you also have to really be prepared to ask that question directly. Find the right words that reflect who you are, that is authentic and genuine and meaningful. But these are all words that we apply in our most meaningful relationships in our life as well. So that's, you know, part of this, I guess, all of that to say, Paul, is you need to find a way to frame it for yourself so that you understand why you're really doing it, why it's important, and that actually it connects with things that really matter, not like, oh, it's that thing I have to do and I hate.
And to be
Absolutely.
fair, sales has to be done for funding as well. You're actually selling yourselves again. It's the same kind of thing. And to your point, actually, Trevor, the best money coming in is through revenue or product sales versus funding, which is typically, one-off type event. So by all means, I totally agree with that. Necessity, as you say, Paul, it's probably a big change for a lot of people. But it's absolutely important.
Yeah. I mean, you're either going to or not going to have a business if you don't embrace sales. So maybe, as Trevor said, maybe taking the time to really understand how to do it effectively and compassionately and with integrity. It doesn't have to be a dirty word. It's what makes the world go around. We're all selling all the time. And
I think that every day when we meet somebody new or talk to somebody, we are basically selling ourselves. We're
right.
selling who we're like. We're selling, our personalities. We're selling, are you going to like us or not? Like it's always, I think that if you go right back to the basics, we are selling all the time. We just don't know it.
I wanted to add something here too. I think this is a very interesting conversation. I think it's especially hard at the beginning,
Yes.
selling. And I think selling's especially hard at the beginning for multiple reasons. Of course, you're not used to it. You might not have your technique. You might not have discovered your sea legs. You might not feel authentic and so on. But I think the most important reason why selling is hard at the beginning is because you probably haven't developed the conviction that what you're providing truly matters. It truly solves the problem. You might know it intellectually, you might hope it, but you don't really know it because you haven't lived enough with the consequences. You haven't seen the results time and time again, which fuels authentic conviction. It reminds me of work that I did. I told you I studied police officers. I also studied doctors, and young, inexperienced physicians can really struggle doing painful procedures on patients, even though intellectually they know from medical school that those painful procedures are going to result in better outcomes. Problem is that they haven't experienced it themselves, versus a very experienced physician who's seen time and time again that yes, the crying and the wincing right now that this or the fear that this person's experiencing, 3 days later, they're going to be so happy they did this, and I know it works, right? That sort of sense of lived conviction ends up fueling a very authentic way of selling, because you know what you're doing matters. You know what you truly believe in what you're doing. Problem is at first it requires a bit of a leap of faith, and I think that's where it's challenging for beginning entrepreneurs.
Let me add one thought to that if I can, because I think it's spot on, Andy. I got so excited when you said that. At the beginning, we don't have the evidence to demonstrate our value to ourselves. We may have sold it to somebody, right, with a little discomfort, not even feeling authentic, but go, okay, I got to do it. And over time, we haven't really appreciated our full value and the full value of the products or services that the organization offers that you've just created. And I'll tell you, one of the first things we do when we're working with entrepreneurs is we look at their pricing, because it's almost always too low. And especially if they've come from a situation where they have not been the driver of change. People undervalue themselves because they just got a message that said you're not valuable. And so then they go, well, I guess I have to do this. And so they create this product or service and build a company around it. And they still have that feeling of lack of value. And so that's where that confidence becomes so important. But getting the value right and being able to recognize the impact of that, I think is just so incredibly important. So if any of you are running businesses, like, up your prices, you're worth it. It's great.
Yeah, I agree with that. When I was doing my book, I met with someone that actually works for a publishing company, and I self-published my book. And so, I didn't know hardly anything about doing it, but I went to them and we were talking, and she said, how much are you going to price it at? And I told her, and she said, nope, you're not. You're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to stay by it. And I said, okay. And so, my ebook is selling for $19.99. I go on to all of these. I've been on a lot of webinars and whatnot, and they keep promoting, sell your book for $1.99. And I'm not going to sell my book for $1.99 because it is devaluing it. That is exactly what I think. It is okay. I'm going to pick up a book for $1.99. Are you going to get the same value as something else? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that, but I will not lower the price of my book. There. And you told me not to, so I'm not.
Well, certainly what you said resonated with me, Trevor, because that we still don't have a lot of on pricing. We still wing it from client to client. Our projects are hopefully medium to large size projects, so we don't have dozens and dozens at the same time. We don't go through this every day. But still, when we face it, we're still not confident about where we're setting the price. We just don't know how valuable this is to our client, and we're afraid we're going to lose the sale if we price it too high. And but we're learning. But it's just really resonated with me. It's a big issue.
Okay, we're going to be running out of time quickly. I hope my panelists don't have to jump on just quite or off yet. So I'm just going to read this. Many of the points relating to entrepreneurship in general are all good points, but what are the challenges specifically for older people in sales, which we already talked about, for example, but in other areas as well? And conversely, what have we got going for us that wins it over younger people in the same position?
Huh. Well, I can, I'm not sure if the questioner had this in mind, but I think this might resonate with Mike. In my TED Talk, doing the research for it, I found that older entrepreneurs have a 70% success rate starting a business. And that number is more like 27 or 28% for your 20-something or 30-something entrepreneur. So 70% success rate for an older entrepreneur. That's pretty amazing. In my talk, I refer to us as the Golden State Warriors of entrepreneurs. That would not be a relevant comment anymore, but in 2017, it was a relevant comment. Yeah, because we don't have that many more opportunities left in us just by virtue of our age. So we don't have a lot of do-overs. So we probably take a lot more time to consider what we're going to do. And we bring 40 years of experience to the table. So, of course we should be successful 70% of the time. I wonder if investors are as familiar with that statistic as they ought to be, when they're faced with an older entrepreneur who's looking to raise money. Did you know that fact, Mike?
I didn't know that fact, so interesting. I'm not surprised. I think there's a misconception that most, entrepreneurs who are like young 20s.
Yeah.
Most of the entrepreneurs I see that are really serious are, if anything, middle-aged. So, well, does that include us? I guess so. But typically, I think at one point a number of years ago, the average age I saw one study was in the mid-40s. So for someone actually starting a business and getting some funding, it probably has moved around a certain amount. I'm not sure what it is exactly now, but it's something that you're right. I think at this point, not only do we have more experience and that we understand the market better, we probably also understand ourselves better. And we've kind of put those two things together and figure out, okay, where we should go. So
absolutely.
I was speaking with an entrepreneur yesterday, and he's over 60. He's going to get funding. It's the first time he'll go over some major funding. And I think he's going to do just fine. I don't see any reason why he'd be treated any different than someone who's 20 or 40 or otherwise. He's if anything, he's got more experience. And at the end of the day, he has a good business with a great team, great product. I think that's at the end of the day what the entrepreneur is selling, and that's what the investor is looking for.
Right. I agree.
I think the hardest thing, though, is trying, for me anyways, in especially for what I'm doing, is trying to get in and talk to organizations and talk and get the support from them. And they are not understanding, just like what you say, Paul. Like I tell them, well, did you not know that we have a 70% success rate? And that even goes further, that being in business for 5 years versus young entrepreneurs. Really? I didn't know that. Yeah, they need to, many businesses and organizations need to understand that, hey, we are here, we have the experience, we have the initiative and the skills to become a great entrepreneur. And so what? Don't let our age get in the way. Don't. I mean, if we're going to be around longer, we're dedicated. And I remember the first year that I did my 50 over 50 awards, I was speaking to someone in PEI who had boat tours. And he said, you couldn't depend on young people to come to work. All his work were for older people, but they wouldn't let him advertise and specifically say you were over the age of whatever to do it. But, you know, we're more dependable. We're awesome. It's the only way to put it.
What I would say is that for me, I think the most important thing is to have a diverse team, if you can, if you have that luxury. And that would mean, you know, men, women, older, younger. If you can bring that whole team together, that's probably the most powerful combination,
Definitely.
if that's possible.
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, you'll always get the people such as myself. I want to work alone. There's way too much work for me, but I want to work alone.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
I contract a lot of my stuff out, but as you know, I just know that I would have a hard time trying to listen to somebody else. Like I know my faults, right? And so I keep myself within my own line, so to speak, and know that I never want to. I'm an awful manager. I never want to manage people. I'm just not good at it. So you know, so then you start building a team and.
Well, you paint quite a rosy picture of yourself there.
Oh, I'm a terrible manager. I hate managing people because I'll go to say something and and then I can't say it, and then I might have hurt their feelings. So, you know, it's just, we're all different, and I don't want a big team. I just want me and my contractors. So there. And if anybody wants to finance me, I'll be nice to them too. All right, any more questions here? Let me just have a look here before we say goodbye. Thank you, Wendy, for bringing this group together. Okay, there's enough content. I love it. Oh, great. I'm glad everybody liked this. Thank you. Okay, so Virginia, I don't know whether Jenny is still on here or not. There she is. She says this is, as you can see from my granddaughter, seniorpreneurs can also multitask. She has her granddaughter with her on this call. So. All right. Anybody else want to say anything?
I just, you know, as a listener, I thought this was a wonderful session. Great advice from three, you know, marvelous experts in their areas, and you don't come by that every day. So just fantastic. Pleasure to meet everybody as well.
I'll echo that. I learned a lot. Thank you, and was also inspired. So
okay, thank you ever so much. Just some ending stuff here. So thank you, Paul. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate you coming and doing this with me. People have been asking where you can buy my book, and you can get it on my website. I will be sending an email to everyone that is on the call to give them some more information. I will also have links to the panelists and moderators if anybody wants to get in touch with them. And I'm going to be doing this as the first in a series. And so I will let you know about the next one. It is tentatively planned for May the 17th. And we will be talking about networking, and there will be one other topic, which I'm not sure what it's going to be yet. I think I know, but I have to get permission from the contributor to see if he wants to come on board. So thank you ever so much. I truly appreciate you attending this, and I hope that you have learned something and have been inspired, if you are thinking of becoming an entrepreneur, of taking that leap. If you don't do it, you'll never know, right? So any parting words, Paul?
No, not at all. I really feel like it was a complete session. It was marvelous.
Good, thank you. And people are saying thank you to the panelists. So, and they're feeling motivated. So yeah, great, good. All right. Well, thank you once again. You have my email address if you want to get in touch with me, Wendy@launchitright.com. And I look forward to seeing you next time.